Welcome to International Genetic Solutions Stand Together. I'm Ben Kreitz. With me today is Dr. Elizabeth Dressler, American Simmental Association lead geneticist. Dr. Dressler is here to help us with a basic course in understanding expected progeny differences and selection indexes, and how to use them. Welcome, Dr. Dressler.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We sure appreciate you joining us today, and as we start to think about the foundation of some of the tools that are available to members, I think a great place to start is, can you describe what is an EPD? Or more so, what does an EPD actually predict?
Sure, yeah. So an EPD, it stands for expected progeny difference. And that can sound a little bit confusing or intimidating, but I like to sort of break it down word by word. And it'll tell you exactly what it is. So expected, that means a prediction, or we're making a prediction. Progeny or offspring, and then difference. So what are the predicted differences among offspring? And so really that kind of describes what it is for you. And really when it comes down to it, an EPD is a comparison tool to help you make your breeding decisions, whether that's selection or culling, but it is meant to be compared between different animals to guide those decisions.
So maybe an example of that would be weaning weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a producer would use the weaning weight EPD to compare two sires, would you walk us through maybe an example of that comparison?
Sure, yeah. For example, if we had one bull that was a weaning weight EPD of, say, 70, and one was a weaning weight EPD of 90. When you're making that comparison between those two, it's a difference. So you would subtract those 20 pounds. So on average, you would expect the progeny from that 90 pound or that 90 weaning weight EPD to weigh 20 more pounds on average compared to the other choice.
So really a nice way for producers and members to compare two sires when they're making mating decisions.
Exactly, it's a comparison tool.
You bet. So if we go maybe a step further after an EPD, could you describe, we hear this term a lot, of an index.
Sure.
Can you describe what does an index predict?
Yeah, so really in the context of genetic evaluation, we focus on economic selection indexes, and that's a key piece. So really an index, it combines all of those different EPDs that are economically important. And so it combines them and it weights them all appropriately based on the economics or the dollar amount. And it makes it really simple for producers to select for because it's one number, but it combines all of those different EPDs that are important, and you can make selection just on that one number and know that you're also touching on all of those different things that are incorporated into it. And it's also super handy because, like I mentioned, economics, so it's weighted by an economic value or a dollar amount. So you're really making selection towards increased profit by using it.
And still the same comparison, right? If
Exactly.
we compare sire A and sire B, it's still the difference between those two as we think about the value added between those two bulls.
Yes, exactly. You would utilize it the same way in comparing different bulls.
So as we continue to look at the EPD profile, whether that's on an animal's page online, or you see this a lot in sale catalogs, something called accuracy, or ACC. Can you explain a little bit about what accuracy means, or what does that represent?
Yeah, so it goes back to an EPD being a prediction. And so because it's a prediction, there's a sort of range and sort of the confidence or the reliability around that estimate. And so it sort of is describing that level of confidence behind that EPD. And so as we gather more sources of information that get incorporated into that prediction, we expect the accuracy to go up. So your accuracy will range from 0 to 1, and as you get higher up towards 1, that means we're more accurate. And it really comes down to a risk assessment. If you have a EPD that's an accuracy of 0.9, and that same EPD value as that 0.9 accuracy, it's the same EPD, but a lower accuracy, you would be taking on more risk by selecting that one that's a 0.2 because we're just less confident about what that true value is.
So maybe a younger bull, maybe a yearling bull that sells this spring, we would expect to have a lower accuracy for a certain trait, or for all of the traits rather.
Yes.
And then over time, as that bull has progeny, as that progeny's data is submitted into the evaluation, we would expect that the accuracy for those traits would increase.
Correct, yes. We would expect as we take in more information that the accuracy would go up. Genotyping has really helped with increasing that accuracy, like you mentioned, on young animals. But really when it comes down to it, progeny records are also super important, and so over time, as we get more of those, that will increase as well.
And then the third thing you see a lot in sale catalogs, you'll have the layout of the EPD, the accuracy, and then there'll be a third number that's a percent. And how can members utilize the percentile ranks in evaluating how a certain animal performs for that EPD profile?
So it really comes back to a comparison. So like we had the example on weaning weight earlier, we were comparing between two different bulls. Say maybe you didn't have that other bull to compare it to and you're just looking at that one number. That number alone, that EPD, doesn't really tell you a whole lot of information unless you're comparing it to something else. So the percentile ranking offers that sort of comparison that you can make. So really what it does is it breaks down what the population that you're looking at is. So for example, in the Simmental database, we would have the percentile corresponding to where that animal's EPD would sort of rank compared to the rest of the population. And that offers a comparison that you can make
between those two.
Yes.
So one of the unique things about IGS is it's a multi-breed genetic evaluation. With that, are members able to directly compare EPDs across breeds?
Yes, so that's fantastic. Within the IGS database, like you mentioned, multiple breeds are partners in that, and they all are coming out of the sort of same source genetic evaluation. And with that, that's why you're able to directly compare EPDs across different breeds because they're coming from the same source.
Those that are in the group of IGS
Yes.
partners. So
Yes.
for example, a weaning weight EPD for Simmental is directly comparable to the weaning weight EPD for Red Angus.
Exactly, yes. And it makes it really, really easy to just directly compare those, especially if you're working with multiple different breeds or a crossbreeding system.
So we have an entire suite of EPDs that are produced by the IGS genetic evaluation and indexes as well. What do you feel like in your role as you visit with breeders, what EPDs are folks really focusing on or seem to be paying a lot of attention to?
Yeah, so if someone asks me what sort of EPDs should I be looking at or what's important, I really kind of turn the question around on them and I say, well, what are your goals? What are your breeding objectives? And that's really important to first sort of line out what your goals are, and then we can touch on EPDs that will help you get to that goal. And so we really want to try to avoid selecting for one specific trait. For example, the weaning weight example, that might be important, but we also don't want to put so much selection pressure in one area that we might see detrimental effects in another. So it's really important to sort of spread that selection pressure out across several different traits and avoids single trait selection. But that's where the indexes come in handy, is because that's already sort of cooked into it.
Okay.
And it's balanced out, and so you don't have to worry about that if you're making selection on indexes.
So really we're fortunate that there are a variety of traits to select from or to focus on or emphasize on based on our production goals, as my goals might be different from your operation and different from our neighbor.
Exactly, yes. So yeah, that's why it's really important to ahead of time sort of line out what your goals are, and then that gives everybody sort of the freedom to move in the direction they're wanting. Maybe that's more of a maternal focus or a terminal focus or different things like that. People really have the freedom to select in different areas that they are wanting to work towards.
Okay. A term I hear a lot as I visit with seed stock breeders and turning in data is talking about contemporary groups. Can you help us understand what's a contemporary group?
Yes, contemporary groups are very important. And so in the context of a genetic evaluation, it really is just a group of cattle or group of animals that are all experiencing the same environment. And when I say environment, that basically means everything else except for genetics. So they're within the same breeder, or the same herd, same year or season that they were born. So they're around the same age, same sex, things like that. So it's all on a same comparable basis. And why that's really important for a genetic evaluation is because by putting them in their contemporary groups, we can really start to parse out the components that are due to genetics and the components that are due to the environment. So we can really start to tell, does that animal perform really well because they have high genetic merit, or did they perform really well because they were experiencing a really favorable environment?
So can a breeder have multiple contemporary groups at their operation as they turn data in?
Yes, yes, and that's why it's super important that when you are turning in that data that you designate those contemporary groups and sort of provide that information that allows those animals to be grouped properly.
So examples of that might be a group of replacement heifers that have been weaned and are being developed, or a group of bulls for a bull sale. Might be those different contemporary groups then?
Yes, if you're feeding things differently, if you're separating them out, if they're experiencing different managements or environments in really any way, then they should be sort of designated as different contemporary groups.
We've talked a little bit about this earlier, and as we think about EP accuracies increasing over time as data is submitted, as an animal would be maybe proven is a term that's used a lot. But we also see EPDs shift, and we talked about that in the possible change from a EPD with a lower accuracy has a range that it can change depending on that accuracy, and as more data is submitted, accuracy is increased and that EPD might shift.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, and even maybe go a step further, as within the IGS evaluation, those EPDs are updated weekly?
Yes, yes. So like you mentioned, within the IGS evaluation, that is run every single week. So it's a weekly evaluation, and so any new data that comes in within that past week will now be incorporated and reflect in that next week's EPDs. And so over time, like you mentioned, we're collecting different sources of information that might go into that EPD prediction. So say we start out usually with a pedigree, and then we might add in their genotype, we might add in their own performance or their progeny's performance. And as we're sort of gathering up all of those pieces of information, they get incorporated into the evaluation as they're collected, and then that reflects into the EPD, and it's updated every single week.
Well, Elizabeth, I think it's been a fantastic discussion to build on this foundation of what are EPDs, what is an index, what does accuracy or percentile ranks mean, but why should producers trust the EPDs that are published?
So the concept of EPDs, or genetic evaluations, really has been around for a long time. It's not a new crazy statistical methodology that we've just come up with. It really was sort of, the concept first came around going on about 90 years ago, or 9 decades ago. And over time we've made improvements to that, and we've had computing power advance over time, and so over time we're really moving in a positive direction of being able to make those predictions more and more accurate for producers. As well as within the IGS database, like we talked about earlier, there's several different partners that are all contributing data. And so with that, we've accumulated a really large database of progeny records and pedigree and genotypes. And so with that, the data that's backing those predictions is quite robust. And so I think that that really goes to show that producers can trust the EPDs, and those of members that have been making selection utilizing EPDs can be a testament to how well they work.
And we are fortunate to have such a large database, but we continue to see that database grow,
yes.
Right?
Records are being added, like we talked about, every single week as members are collecting that data, and it just is exponentially going up over time.
Well, thanks, Dr. Dressler. And to learn more about how to use selection tools generated through the IGS multi-breed genetic evaluation, or for other educational videos like this, please visit internationalgeneticsolutions.com.